All right, guys, so the next thing I'm going to show you is I'm going to show you how to help the horse a little bit in terms of your center of gravity when you're going up and down hills on the trail, okay? It's amazing how much you can help a horse, you know, over a you know, multiple hour trail ride. It's physically a lot easier for a horse if you can help him by riding correctly, okay? So first, the basics. You're looking at Rebel here. The thing to keep in mind is that his center of gravity is like right here in the middle of the stirrup fender, okay? So the closer you can stay to that, the better, all right? So you basically want to stay in line with that. If you're going downhill, leaning way over his neck, he's got to fight that, all right? And when going downhill, that's actually the worst case scenario if you're way ahead of his center of gravity. If you're going uphill, if you're way behind his center of gravity, you're creating a lot more work for him, okay? All right, guys, so I'm gonna show you how to help a horse in terms of center of gravity when we're going uphill, all right? So the horse is already going to be dealing with his center of gravity kind of falling behind him, all right? So the last thing you wanna do is make that worse for him, and that would be like hanging out back like this, all right? And that's gonna be your natural reaction when you're going uphill. You're not gonna realize it, but your body weight's just gonna do that to you, right? So you're gonna kind of be flopped back like this thing, like, you know, like this is hard on the horse going uphill like that. So what you wanna do is just lean a little bit forward, okay? You don't have to be crazy about it, but lean a little bit forward and help him up the hill, okay? Like this. This is proper, right? Just kind of centered on the horse, okay? Not like this, you know. You don't wanna do that. You wanna be centered on the horse here, okay? All right, guys, so I'm gonna go over helping the horse in terms of his center of gravity going downhill, all right? The horse, particularly in real steep terrain, you're actually gonna feel him fighting the ground underneath him. He'll kind of be shuffling underneath on steep ground, and that's him trying to keep his center of gravity upright. So you don't wanna exacerbate that by leaning over like this, okay? Because now he's gonna have to fight harder to keep you up there. All right, so what you want to do is when you're going down is just try to lean slightly back, all right, where you're still parallel to the ground, slightly back, okay, not like this. All right, guys, so I'm going to quickly show you just the proper spot to sit in the saddle. So intuitively, you want to kind of have the center of your butt, like the points of your hip bones that are down there, kind of right in here, okay? You don't want them way back on this part of the saddle or way up in the front where you're crushing your balls. So jump up here and you'll feel those points of your hip bones. And they're kind of dead center of that seat, all right? One thing guys do is when their knees start hurting them, a lot of times I'll see them in the mountains start riding like this, okay? And it seems like a good idea, but this is, you know, people just don't know any better, but this is like the equivalent of asking your guide if you can use his rifle for a walking stick, all right? When you do this, it puts an extreme amount of pressure on the horse's kidneys, and it'll make their back sore, and it can make their back sore for a week at a time, okay? So don't do this. Don't sit way back on that just to relieve your knees. I know it can be, you know, it can be painful, particularly going downhill, all that pressure on your knees, but don't do that. It's hard on the horses. And, yeah, I mean, it's easy for you to fall off if something were to happen too. So if you have a problem, like your knees are hurting, do what I suggested earlier, and that's get your stirrups adjusted or even get off for 5 minutes. But you want to be right here in the middle, and that's the best spot. There's a couple different ways people sit, and there's a bunch of different styles of riding, and everybody's going to have their opinion on this. Like a lot of reining, cutting horse guys, a lot of times what they do is they sit and they roll the last couple of vertebrae under, kind of under, so they're sitting on that. They're not necessarily sitting on their hip bones. That's how I sit. I basically sit in bad posture with my tailbone rolled underneath, and for me that's more comfortable. But a lot of people will sit rolled forward where the bones of their hips are in the saddle. You'll kind of find your preference pretty quickly. But the main thing is don't be too forward like this, you know, where your legs are wrapped around this section of the saddle right around the horn, and don't be back. You know, this is the extreme case, but don't even be sitting way back here in the back of the saddle. That's hard on the kidneys of the horse, okay? So the happy medium's right in the middle, and then you'll figure out if you want to be upright with the postured back up or rolled over. You'll find what is comfortable for you, and then you'll go with that. And you might kind of switch between the two also if certain parts of your body are getting sore. All right, so on the pads, one thing that can happen, and people don't really realize this intuitively, but when you're going on rides that are 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours, all this stuff can loosen up, all right? The horses are not an inanimate object, so you can't get things just to stay perfectly tight on them. Nobody's done anything wrong. It's just a function of using them, right, over time. So this cinch can come a little loose, right? Even when you have it locked in, it can come a little loose after riding. And what can happen is these pads can shift a little bit. So it's important for you as a hunter because the guide can't always see this, right? So when you get on a horse and it's all set up, how the guide has it set up for you, usually what you're gonna see is the lower pad is like a ½ inch to an inch ahead of the upper pad. And then between the upper pad and the leather of the saddle, you're gonna see 1 or 2 inches, right, at a minimum. You wanna keep that sight picture, right? So lower pad, front of the second pad, and then all the pads like 2 inches in front of any leather. If you start to see this pad getting sucked under or both pads getting sucked under, like you're sitting on a horse and you're looking down and all of a sudden the pads are gone, you need to tell your guide because they need to be readjusted. This is a very common thing, particularly in rough terrain. So keep that in mind and make sure you look down and see that sight picture. And the same thing with the cinch, okay? If you start to feel like, we'll show you when we're riding, but if you feel like when you put a little left foot pressure or right foot pressure, like that saddle wants to roll a little bit on you, it probably means over time that cinch has loosened up a little bit. So those are 2 things for you to be conscientious of. All right, guys, so we're gonna show you how we get hunters on for our drop camps and for our guided hunts here at the Flat Tops Wilderness Guides facility. And this is gonna be very similar to probably what you're exposed to up in wall tent camps. It's the same setup that we use up there also. All right, so Jimmy's gonna come in here and help me, and he's gonna be the guide. I'll be the hunter. He's generally gonna pull the horse away from the other horses so we don't have to deal with that. And then the bridle's gonna be all set up. He's gonna put that on here. And then just for demonstration purposes, I'll show you as the hunter, but Jimmy would do this as the guide. He's just gonna snug the cinch up a little bit, okay? All right, so at this stage, generally we ask guys if they're comfortable getting on their own, or if they need a boost. And don't be embarrassed about wanting a boost. It's a lot safer to get one than not if you need one, okay? So one, we can just kind of give you a foot up, or sometimes we use our rock. A lot of guys have little stools or something like that, and so we'll show you how that works. And for you guys that don't ride a lot, this is it's gonna help you a lot. So basically the guide's gonna pull the horse up to a solid stump or rock or whatever, and then you've got the downward angle on the saddle, right? Or at least it's like at your waist, okay? Rebel's not being super cooperative, but it's a lot easier for you to get on here if you're not used to getting on the saddle. And because you can easily get it in here, and you can get your weight across the horse really quickly, okay? So that's what a boost looks like. Like I said, don't be embarrassed if you need one. All right, so the basics of getting on, guys, is just a safety thing. We'll go over this when I'm on the horse too, but just basically the ball of your foot, okay? Don't go like this, like the heel of your boot in there. If your first attempt is a wreck or whatever and you flop back off, you don't want to have your foot buried in there where you're stuck, okay? So just the ball of your foot. And this action alone, if you're not used to it, can be a little tricky. So get the ball of your foot in there, and then what you want to do is you want to get close to the horse, okay? You don't want to, like this, it's all like a balance thing. If you're out here, see how much tension I'm putting on the saddle? You want to get close to the horse and then put as much pressure perpendicular to the ground as you can into the stirrup, and then it's just to push up and then swing your leg across, okay? And then find that other stirrup, these are a little short for me, and then straighten your saddle. right when you get on, okay? And then you're good. Make sure, just double check your feet are just slightly in there. Okay, so Jimmy's still holding the horse for me, and he's gonna go ahead and tie up the halter. And while the guide's dealing with that, the best thing for you to do is just keep a slight tension on the horse so he doesn't go walk off. Okay, all right. So you're on the horse now, and then the next thing that that we always do, this is going to be generally just at the beginning of your hunt, is the guide's going to adjust the stirrups for you. Okay, so we do that while the hunter's on typically if they can deal with it. And so I'm just going to kick this foot forward like this, and I'm going to tell Jimmy that they're just a little short for me. And just so you guys know, whenever these stirrups are getting adjusted, the mechanics of that leather is they have to be whipped out, and sometimes the horses, it'll spook the horses just a smidge. It's not a big deal. So then anything he does on one side, he's gonna have to do on the other side. So I'll pick this leg up for him. If you kick your leg forward or backwards, for whoever's adjusting the stirrups, it won't work. It's not that it won't work, it's just you'll be in the way. So now I've got just the balls of my feet in the stirrups. And then how I check them, because there's a band of length that'll work for people, is for me, I like to be able to pick my ass up just probably like 1.5 inches, 2 inches. That's the comfortable spot for me, okay? And you, for sure, at a minimum, you want to be able to pull up all the pressure off your ass. That's the longest you would want your stirrups. And so what you're gonna find is the trade-off. Longer stirrups for most people are gonna be slightly more comfortable on long rides, but they're gonna feel less secure. And the reason is because as your legs extend out, you have less thigh pressure on the saddle where you can hold on, okay? But they're gonna be more comfortable for your knees the longer they are. The higher up they are, you've got more contact with the horse. But if you ride like this, like jockey style, for 3 hours or so, and you don't ride a lot in particular, you're gonna be in pain. So there's a trade-off there. On really long rides, you know, like a 6 or 7 hour ride, you might find that midway through that you ask your guide to just extend them a little bit or even go up a little bit. Just changing where they're at can relieve a little bit of that pain, okay? So that's your stirrups. And then I'll just go over, you know, the guides will show you the basics of reining the horses. And almost all these mountain horses are gonna be what's called the Western broke. And what it means is they react off the rein, okay? So just pressure of the rein right here makes him turn, all right? Okay, and so it's the rein that does it. So in terms of this, you're gonna move both reins, and that's gonna make him go the way you want, okay? And then stop is just a little pull back, okay? And what kills guys on the stop, and really everything turning too, is once a horse does what you've asked, you know, you get him to stop and takes a step back, give him back the reins, okay? Novice people on horses, generally what they do is they oversteer the animal, okay? So if you keep pulling on, and now you're frantic because, you know, something else is going on and you don't realize, well, that's a good example, I suppose, but you don't realize that you keep pulling on the, like something like that occurs and your reaction is like, oh shit, and you keep pulling. Well, the horse, it's not that the horse is continuing to react to the problem. What he's doing is he's reacting to you now and you're telling him to back up. So you need to give him his reins back and let him relax and quit telling him to do something that you're not really wanting him to do, okay? So that's an important thing for you to think about. Sometimes, particularly these horses get ridden by a lot of people. The first thing you realize on trail horses, usually they've been in and out of the area you're going to a bunch of different times, and they're very self-preservationist about the whole deal. They want to get in there, stay on the trail, stay safe themselves, get you to camp and come out, okay? Which means that they're generally pretty dull to what you ask them to do. If you ask them to go off a cliff, they're not going to do it, okay? If you ask them to go off trail, you know, away from the other 20 horses and mules, they're generally not going to do it, okay? So sometimes because of that, they can be a little dull. And you know, they may be eating grass and you don't want them to do that. Like we tell our clients, you know, yeah, if they grab a little bite to eat or whatever, it's not a big deal. But you don't want them eating a lot, because then you end up with big gaps in the line and they'll trot back up to the other horses. So we try to deter that behavior. But if they're a little dull in terms of their reining, sometimes if he's eating off that side, just going like this and Western reining him back, he'll ignore it. So you have to just reach down and just grab this and kind of pop his nose, and that'll help you a little bit. Don't get, particularly when you're just learning, don't get super aggressive with that, because it's like tenfold the steering of just going like this from the horse's perspective. Okay, so keep that in mind. The other thing, and this is gonna touch back to the first safety / herd mentality, a horse concept I was talking about, and I guess what I'll quote is, I remember my dad telling me this, old wise Bill Gray, is it's a horse, not a fucking four-wheeler, okay? So that means everything that you do, the animal is gonna react to. And the key thing that people do, particularly for some reason if they're used to just vehicles and stuff, is they don't realize that when you try to hold on like this and you put a lot of pressure on the horse, they react by moving, because they feel that, okay? They feel all that, all those little things, okay? So if you're gonna hold on that way, like the horse spooks or moves a little bit, yeah, you're gonna have to hold on with the contact points here, but realize that you gotta let go, because that's a lot of pressure on the horse, okay? Like this horse is pretty dull to it, he's just dead gentle and broke, but a lot of horses, that'll make them, you know, that'll make them try to trot. So you gotta be cognizant of that, is everything has a reaction with a live animal, okay? It's not an inanimate object, and people that aren't used to that, it takes them a little while to realize that, okay? All right, guys, so I'm gonna quickly go over getting off, all right? They're gonna run into more problems when you get off than when you're getting on. Generally, when you're getting on, it's a pretty controlled environment, particularly the first couple times you get on. The guide's on top of it, he's watching you, trying to help you, and everything's tight, right? You just started, the cinch is tight, everything's good to go, your stirrups are all set up. When you get off, it could be 5 hours later after a 5-hour ride or something, everything loosens up a little bit. You know, not everything is as sharp as it was when you get on, so you need to be conscientious. The biggest thing that I see is like just a safety thing for you, is you can always reach down and feel if that cinch is loose like that. Okay, that might be a little hard for somebody who's just learning. The other way you can check how loose that cinch is, put your hand on the saddle horn and just go like this, okay? If that saddle is moving a ton, and particularly if it's staying like off angle, like go down the mane of the horse, that horn should be in the middle, and it should recenter pretty much when you put pressure on each side. It's not doing that, your cinch is loose, okay? Getting off with a loose cinch when you're just learning can be really dangerous. So if you think that cinch is loose, make sure somebody tightens it before you get off, okay? Now, the other key of the deal is it's just the reverse of what I was talking when you get when you're getting on. You want to minimize, let me get him turned around here. You want to minimize how much you keep your balance way away from the horse's center of gravity, okay? So like this shit is not a good idea way out here. See how much that saddle's pulling, right? Okay, if that cinch is loose at all, the saddle can roll. What you want to do is keep your center of gravity close, you know, pressure perpendicular to the ground, and come down the horse, okay? See how much less pressure there was out here on that side? So that's what you want to focus on and be a lot safer for you. So that's basically getting off. The other key thing I didn't mention is just do a double check on that. Make sure when you're getting off that you don't have that foot buried in there super deep. You just want it, basically when you pop off, when you're popping down, when you hit the ground, that just slips out. Okay, that's the perfect depth there. So that's getting off a horse.